Hey there, welcome to another Walking with Coach Tim, and it's that time of year again. A lot of the high schools have already done their first game. For a lot of the guys are going to have their first game next week. College is starting up. It's a pretty exciting time of the year for most. I want to address something that is probably the biggest problem in sports, but certainly in football. I just had a long discussion with this and why a friend of mine on Facebook doesn't even like football for the culture it's breeding. And the culture is win at all costs. What football has become at every level is who can recruit the best. It's not about coaching up, it's about recruiting the best. So certainly it's nice when you have talented guys on your team, but what ends up happening is that allows coaches not to have to coach. They don't coach the fundamentals, they don't know how to team build, they're not doing any of the things that can really build a successful team, a successful program, a successful league, and also a successful player. And I'm not talking about football success, I'm talking about life success. A lot of guys might say, well, that's not my problem. Then I will say, then you are the problem. If that's not your problem, then you are the problem. A coach is more than just X's and O's. And a lot of times the guys that are like that are actually the guys that are the worst coaches, because that's all they know is they know X's and O's, and like I like to say a lot, that's just math. It's not that difficult. So let me give you a pretty good outline of how to build a team, build a program, build a league that lasts, that builds consistent success on the field and off. And really what it starts with, of course, on the field is a good offensive, defensive, and special teams scheme. You got to know football, right? But like I said, it's not rocket science. A lot of guys want to believe it's rocket science. It's not. It's who can scheme and trick the best. Where the nuances are is where the success can come from. Where are those nuances? As people have gotten more into scheming, they've gotten further and further away from fundamentals. Fundamentals of blocking and tackling are huge, and we're forgetting how to do that. I've been to a lot of practices over the last few years on other programs, high school, youth, and the fundamentals are an afterthought. And so what happens is we end up getting into scheme, scrimmage, and there's not a lot being taught. And so that's why I advocate so heavily towards Bobby Hosea's tackling, because not only is it strong fundamentals for tackling, and it's a great system, but as a coach, it's a great system for a coach to learn how to build progressions into any type of fundamental teaching. You don't see progressions anymore, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's an indication. Progressions are kind of learning how to crawl before you can walk, learning how to walk before you can run, learning how to run before you can sprint. And then so that's the fundamentals. That's something that's got to be taught. It's being forgotten, and again, a lot of it is because of the recruiting rage. Just get me more talent and I'll win. And bedamn the players, bedamn their ecology from helping them be better people, better players fundamentally. I'm just going to use them so I can get my win, get my championship this year. The other thing that is important is the culture. I just did an interview with a hypnotist who talked about how to build a cult, culture, same thing. One time I was talking to Jim Mora, the UCLA head coach, and he said, Tim, culture is number one at UCLA. Think about that. The number one thing they worry about, that he worries about, is culture. Okay, well, we touched on that in the last podcast. I suggest you listen to it. It'll change your world once you understand how to leverage that to build a team, and I'm digging even deeper with it as I'm going to be looking at mythology and values, which in football we like to call values philosophy, but I'm going to get a little bit more specific than just philosophy. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of this stuff. So then the last thing that I want to talk to you about today is the Pygmalion effect. Pygmalion it's a Greek myth, and some researchers looked at taking F students and giving them to teachers and saying these are A students, and then giving the A students to other teachers and saying these A students are actually F and D students, without the teachers knowing what they really were. So in other words, they had a higher expectation or a lower expectation of these kids' performances. And what they found was, by and large, the students who were really D students became A and B students based on the expectation of the teacher, or in our case, coach. Are you feeling me? Are you kind of getting what this is? Now, this is a big deal when you're not that guy going out and recruiting and playing the recruiting game, and you're actually looking how to coach. Okay, if you have a higher expectation of everybody, then you realize that the slowest ship is your problem and you have to fix it, right? And it's not easy. I remember, and I'll leave you with this, I remember years ago, it was about 6th or 7th grade, these kids I was coaching, and we'd run sprints, and I'm not a big sprint guy for the sake of sprints to get into shape, although that's okay, but I liked it because it's a team builder. Again, that culture thing. And this one kid was, just almost obnoxiously last. You've had that kid, right? And so we started getting mad. The kids were getting mad at him. I was getting mad at him because I just thought he didn't care, right? And so I started thinking about it. And one day the coaches were whining and complaining that, God, almost to the point like, how do we get him off the team? Because he doesn't care. Almost, not quite, but it's what you're thinking sometimes. And so then I started thinking about it, and I looked into where did he come from, what's he done in the past, what's his personality like. I told the guys, the coaches, I said, you know what? I think he thinks he's working. This is probably the hardest he's ever worked in his life. And I thought, man, not only is that sad, but if we realize what that means, it means that he is working in his view. So we need to expand his level of effort incrementally, because we're not going to do it by just saying run faster. He's so far behind, it's not going to matter. So we have to accept that incrementally he can improve. And he wasn't running 4.4s by the end of the season, by no means, but he was competing, and he was somebody that I tended to trust more so at the end of the season than I was at the beginning. So hopefully you can remember the Pygmalion effect. And again, if you want to have success with a football team, of course, know your X's and O's, but that's the easy part. Know how to build your culture. Know how to make sure you're doing fundamentals, the bulk of practice. And lastly, the Pygmalion effect. Have a higher expectation of your boys.